A tough cowboy finds unexpected love on his ranch. What happened when? Cowboy Secret's full story. Part 1: The Arrival. He was standing in my kitchen at 5 in the morning, soaking wet from the storm outside, holding a duffel bag in one hand and a bottle of whiskey in the other. And the first words out of his mouth weren't "hello" or "I'm back" or even "sorry for showing up unannounced." The first words Eli Carter said to me after 3 years of silence were, "I never stopped thinking about you, Jake. Not once." And I stood there in the dark, barefoot on cold tile, wearing nothing but an old pair of jeans I'd grabbed off the floor, staring at the man I had spent 3 years trying to forget. Rain was dripping from his dark hair. His eyes were the same shade of brown they'd always been: warm, deep, the kind that made you feel like you were standing in sunlight even at 5 in the morning in a storm. And something inside my chest cracked open like dry summer earth finally getting rain. I didn't say anything back. I couldn't. I just stepped aside and let him in. That was the beginning of everything. My name is Jake Mercer. I am 24 years old. I own 340 acres of land in the hill country of central Texas, a herd of 43 cattle, 2 horses named Dusk and Pepper, a border collie named Scout, and a farmhouse that needs a new roof and hasn't felt like a home since my father died 2 years ago. People in town call me quiet. Some call me stubborn. My neighbor, old Mrs. Whitfield, once told my mother that I had the kind of face that looked like it was always carrying something heavy. I didn't argue with her. She wasn't wrong. I grew up on this land. Every fence post, every creek bed, every oak tree on the south pasture, I know them all by name practically. My father built this ranch from almost nothing, working decades of early mornings and late nights into soil that didn't always want to cooperate. When he passed, he left it all to me, along with a stack of unpaid bills and a neighbor who kept offering to buy the east pasture for what amounted to highway robbery. I stayed. I always stay. Mercer men don't run from hard things, and Lord knows this land was the hardest thing I'd ever been asked to carry. I had gotten used to the silence, the kind of silence that lives in a house when you're the only one in it. Mornings feeding the cattle, afternoons fixing fence lines or hauling feed, evenings sitting on the porch with Scout sleeping at my feet and the sound of crickets filling in all the empty space where conversation used to be. It wasn't a bad life. It was honest work. It kept my hands busy and my mind from wandering too far into places it had no business going. Most days, that was enough. Then Eli showed up in my kitchen at 5 in the morning, soaking wet and carrying whiskey, and enough stopped being a word my life had any use for. Eli Carter and I had been best friends since the 3rd grade. His family moved to Millard Creek when we were both 8 years old, and on the very first day of school he walked up to me at recess while I was sitting alone under the big oak tree by the playground. I wasn't sad. I just preferred the tree to the noise, and he sat down next to me without asking, opened a bag of chips, and held it out like we'd been doing this our whole lives. I took a chip. He nodded like something had been decided, and that was that. Eli Carter had decided we were friends, and once Eli Carter decided something, there wasn't much in the world that could change his mind. We were inseparable growing up. Every weekend, every summer, every holiday break that wasn't completely swallowed up by ranch work, Eli was there. He was the kind of person who made everything brighter just by being in the room. Not loud exactly, but alive in a way that was hard to describe. He laughed easily, cried easily too, and had absolutely no patience for people who pretended they didn't feel things. He used to say that emotions were just information, that there was no point in refusing to read the data. I used to roll my eyes at that. Now I think he was right. He had this habit of sketching things. Always carried a small notebook in his back pocket and would pull it out at random moments, during football games, during church, during long truck rides to town, and just start drawing whatever was in front of him. Trees, fence lines, cattle, sunsets. Me sometimes, though he'd always flip the notebook closed before I could get a good look. I never asked him about those ones. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready for the answer. After high school, I stayed on the ranch and he went to college in Austin. We kept in touch those first 2 years, texts, calls, the occasional video chat where he'd prop his phone against a stack of art books and talk to me while he sketched, just like old times. Then his senior year, something shifted. The calls got shorter. The texts got sparse. By the time he graduated, we were down to occasional replies on social media and birthdays. I told myself it was just life. People grow up. People grow apart, that's what happens. I believed that story right up until the moment he appeared in my kitchen, dripping rainwater on my tile floor, telling me he'd never stopped thinking about me. After I let him in that morning, I didn't ask questions. That probably sounds strange, but you have to understand silence is my first language. Questions come second. I handed him a towel from the hall closet, put the kettle on, and pulled a clean flannel shirt from the laundry basket on the chair in the corner. He changed in the bathroom. I made coffee. By the time he came back out, we were both sitting at the kitchen table like it was any ordinary morning, like no time had passed, like the weight of 3 years of silence wasn't sitting right there at the table with us. He wrapped both hands around his mug. His fingers were long, the knuckles a little rough. He'd always been more physical than people expected, always helping me fix things or haul things when he visited the ranch, even though he was an artist and you'd think he'd want to protect his hands. I noticed a faded scar along his left thumb. Knew since I last saw him. I didn't ask about it. "The ranch okay?" he said. "Getting by," I said. "Heard you lost a couple head last winter." "Word travels." "I asked my mom," he said. "She still talks to Mrs. Whitfield." I nodded. I could feel him looking at me, that quiet, careful way he always had, like he was reading something in my face. I kept my eyes on my coffee. "I'm sorry I was gone," he said quietly. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "Nothing to fix," I said, which was a lie, but it was early and I wasn't ready to be honest yet. He didn't push it. That was one of the things about Eli. He always knew when to wait. He just sat there, drinking his coffee, and outside the rain kept coming down, and somewhere in the barn Scout was probably curled up on the old horse blanket I left down there for him, and the world was doing what it always did, which was keep going regardless of what the people in it were feeling. "I left the city," Eli said after a while. "For good, I think, at least for now. My lease was up, the job wasn't working out, and he paused, turned his mug in a slow circle on the table. I needed to come back here. I needed to be somewhere that felt real." I looked at him then. Couldn't help it. He was watching me with this expression that I hadn't seen before, or maybe I had and just never let myself understand it. Something open and careful and a little scared. "You're welcome to stay," I said, "long as you need." Something in his face shifted, relaxed. He let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a very long time. "Thank you, Jake," he said. "You can start earning your keep tomorrow," I said. "East fence line needs new posts." He laughed at that, the real, sudden laugh that I'd been hearing my whole life, the one that went straight through my chest like a hand pressed flat against it. And just like that, something that had been frozen for 3 years started, very slowly, to thaw. Part 2, the first week. The next morning I woke up at 5, the way I always do, and for a full 3 seconds I forgot he was there. Then I heard the sound of the coffee maker running and smelled fresh coffee, and something in my chest did a thing it had no business doing. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, boots in hand, telling myself to get it together. Eli was my best friend. He needed a place to land. That was the whole story. I laced up my boots, splashed water on my face, and went to start the day. He was already on the porch when I came out, sitting on the top step with a mug in both hands, watching the sun come up over the east pasture. The sky was doing that thing it does some mornings out here, painting itself in layers of orange and deep pink and a kind of purple that looks almost impossible. Scout was sitting next to him with his chin on Eli's knee. Trader dog. "Coffee's fresh," Eli said without turning around. I went back in, poured myself a mug, and came out to stand beside him. The air still had the cool, washed-clean smell from last night's storm. The grass was bright with it. "Beautiful," Eli said softly, and I wasn't sure if he was talking about the sunrise. I didn't look at him to find out. I kept my eyes on the horizon. "Fence line starts at the creek bend," I said. I'll show you the tools after breakfast. I remember where the tools are, Jake. You haven't been here in 3 years. I still remember where you keep things. There was something in the way he said that, quiet, certain, that made me drink my coffee faster than I should have. I went inside to start breakfast before my face could do anything embarrassing. Working alongside Eli was something I had not fully prepared myself for. I'd expected it to be awkward, maybe, or distant, the way things can be when you've lost the habit of someone. What I didn't expect was how fast it all came back. The rhythm of it. The way we'd always been able to work together without needing to talk through every step, just falling into a natural sync like two people who'd been building things side by side their whole lives. That first morning at the east fence line, I dug post holes while he hauled the new posts from the truck bed, and we didn't say a dozen words in 2 hours, but it didn't feel like silence in the bad sense. It felt like the comfortable kind. The kind I hadn't had with another person in longer than I wanted to admit. He worked hard. That surprised me too, though maybe it shouldn't have. Eli had always been stronger than he looked, his frame lean but built for endurance, and 3 years in the city hadn't changed that. By noon, his shirt was dark with sweat across the shoulders, and he had a smear of mud along one cheekbone from where he'd pushed his hair back with a dirty hand. And he was laughing at something Scout had done, chased a rabbit into the brush and come out with a confused expression. And I had to turn away and focus very hard on driving in a fence post. Because I was noticing things I had no business noticing. The way his forearms looked in the morning light, the line of his jaw, the sound of his laugh against the open, quiet land. I had a long, stern conversation with myself inside my own head, told myself firmly that this was Eli, that he was my best friend, that he was here because he needed help and I was going to be what he needed, which was a friend and a place to stay and a set of fence posts to drive in. I was very convincing with myself. I almost believed it. By the third day, we had a routine. 5 in the morning, coffee on the porch. 5:30, feed the cattle and horses. 6 to noon, whatever the land needed that day, fence work or trough cleaning or checking the south pasture for the gap that kept appearing in the tree line where something was getting through. Noon, lunch on the tailgate of my truck, usually sandwiches or last night's leftovers, eaten in the shade of whatever tree was closest. Afternoon, lighter work maintenance, sometimes a run into town for supplies. Evening, dinner in the kitchen, dishes, and then sitting on the porch until the fireflies came out. It was the evenings that were the problem. During the day there was always work, always something to focus on, always somewhere sensible to put my eyes and my attention. But evenings on the porch, with the day winding down and the light going soft and gold, and nothing demanding to be done, that was when it got complicated. That was when Eli would pull out his sketchbook, and I would lean back in the old wooden chair my father built, and Scout would arrange himself between us, and the whole scene would feel like something out of a painting, warm and still, and weighted with things neither of us was saying. He never showed me what he was drawing on those evenings. He'd angle the notebook slightly away or flip it to a blank page when he thought I was looking. I pretended not to notice, but I noticed. On the 4th evening he said, without looking up from the notebook, "Do you ever miss it? Being younger, I mean, when things were simpler." "Things were never that simple," I said. "There was always work." "You know what I mean." I did know. "Yeah," I said, "sometimes." "I miss this place," he said. "Even when I was living it up in the city, going to galleries and shows and pretending I was someone with my life figured out, I'd think about this porch, this view." He paused. "I'd think about sitting out here with you." The fireflies were starting up in the long grass at the edge of the yard. I watched them and didn't say anything. "I'm not great at staying in touch," he said. "I know that. I think I was, running from something, and I convinced myself that meant leaving everything behind." He finally looked up at me. The evening light caught his face just right, turned everything warm amber. "I think that was a mistake." "What were you running from?" I asked, and my voice came out quieter than I meant it to. He held my gaze for a moment. Something passed through his expression that I couldn't read, something layered, like a field with roots you can't see from the surface. Things I wasn't ready to deal with, he said. And now, the corner of his mouth curved. It wasn't quite a smile. I'm trying to figure out if I'm ready now. I nodded, looked back at the fireflies. My heart was doing something complicated behind my ribs. Take your time, I said. He went back to sketching. I sat with my coffee and the fireflies, and a feeling in my chest that I absolutely refused to examine too closely. Part 3, the pull. A week became 2, 2 became 3. Eli settled into the ranch the way water settles into dry ground, gradually, naturally, filling in the spaces without making a fuss about it. He started cooking dinner most nights, which was a mercy because my range of cooking skills went about as far as eggs and pan-fried anything. He kept the kitchen clean without being asked. He fixed the broken shutter on the north-facing bedroom window that I'd been ignoring for 8 months. He sang sometimes while he worked, low, under his breath, usually songs I half recognized, and I would catch myself stopping whatever I was doing just to listen. I kept a close eye on myself. I was not a dramatic person. I was not a person who made things bigger than they needed to be. I had feelings the way everyone has feelings, and when they got inconvenient, I set them aside and did my work, and that had served me perfectly well for 24 years. There was no reason it couldn't keep working now. Then came the night of the fence fire. It was a Tuesday. I know that because I'd just gotten back from town where I dropped off the monthly feed order. About 9 in the evening, I looked out the kitchen window and saw an orange glow on the east side of the property. Not large, not catastrophic, but wrong. Somebody's trash burn over the property line had caught a section of dry brush and jumped to the fence line. I yelled for Eli, grabbed the fire extinguisher and 2 shovels from the shed, and we ran. It took 40 minutes to beat it back. Eli worked beside me without hesitation, without complaint, dirt and sweat and smoke turning us both into versions of ourselves that looked like we'd been through something. By the time we had it fully out, we were standing in the dark with our hands on our knees, breathing hard, the smell of char hanging in the warm night air. "You good?" I said. "Yeah." He straightened up, pushed his hair back. There was ash on his forearm and a small red mark on the back of his right hand from where a spark had caught him. I grabbed his wrist before I thought about it, tilted his hand toward the flashlight to look. "It's fine," he said, "just a sting." "Keep still." "Jake, I'm fine." I said keep still. My voice came out harder than I meant. He went still. I examined the burn, minor, surface level, nothing serious, and let out a breath I'd been holding. I realized, standing there in the dark, that I was still holding his wrist, that my thumb had moved without my permission to rest against the inside of his arm just above the burn over the pulse point. I could feel it. His heartbeat, steady and fast at once, or maybe that was my own pulse. It was hard to tell the difference. I let go. "You'll want to run cool water on that when we get back," I said, and started walking. He didn't say anything, but when I glanced back after a moment, he was standing exactly where I'd left him, looking at the hand I'd been holding, with an expression on his face I'd never seen before and couldn't name. Back at the house, he ran his hand under the tap while I washed the ash and sweat from my face and neck. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the water. The light in there is warm and low at night, an old fixture with amber bulbs that my mother chose 15 years ago and I'd never bothered to change, and it made everything feel closer than it was, more contained. He turned off the tap and reached past me for the dish towel, and the reach brought him close enough that I could have turned my head and been a handful of inches from his face. I didn't turn my head. I stepped to the side and got the first aid box from under the sink. "Sit," I said. "Jake." "Eli." He sat at the kitchen table. I sat across from him with the first aid box and put a small amount of burn ointment on a piece of gauze. He held his hand out, palm up. I worked carefully, not because the burn required it, it really was minor, but because I was using the task as a reason to keep my eyes somewhere safe. On the burn, on the gauze, on the mechanics of wrapping 2 loops of white bandage around the back of his hand and tapping it down. "Thank you," he said quietly. You'd do the same. I know. He paused. Thank you. I finished the bandage, smoothed the tape down once, twice. My hand was still resting over his. I made myself pull it back. Get some sleep, I said. We've got the south trough to fix in the morning. Jake. Something in his voice made me look up. He was watching me with that layered expression again, the one I couldn't read all the way down. This close, in this light, his eyes were almost black. What? I said. My voice came out quiet. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at his bandaged hand. Nothing, he said. Good night. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after he went to bed. Scout came in from the porch and put his head on my knee, and I scratched his ears and stared at the first aid box and tried very hard to think about the South Trough. I did not succeed. Part 4, the complication. It was the middle of the 4th week when Danny Calloway came around. Danny Calloway was 26, ran cattle on the property 1 mile east of mine, and had a way of showing up with a truck bed full of borrowed opinions and a smile that most women in Millard Creek seemed to find charming. He and I weren't close, but we got along the way neighbors do when they share a fence line and a general understanding that cooperation is cheaper than conflict. He pulled up to the house on a Saturday afternoon when Eli and I were replacing boards on the barn wall. I heard the truck and looked up. Danny climbed out, tipped his hat in a wide, easy way, and said he was just returning a bale hook he'd borrowed back in February. I introduced him to Eli. Danny shook his hand, sized him up the way men do when they're deciding what to make of someone, and said, "City boy." "Was," Eli said, with a smile that was perfectly pleasant, "recovering." Danny laughed at that. He leaned against the barn wall and got to talking the way he always did, ranch news and cattle prices and the upcoming summer festival in town, and I went back to the board I was replacing, half listening. What I was mostly doing, if I'm being honest, was watching Eli talk to Danny. Eli was easy with people, always had been. He leaned into conversation the way some people lean into a warm doorway, comfortable and natural, and whatever Danny said got real answers, real interest. Danny was responding to it, clearly, straightening up a little, talking a bit more than he probably meant to, finding reasons to stay. At one point Danny said something about the summer festival, about how they were doing a barn dance this year, and he looked at Eli when he said it and added, "You should come. Good time. Meet some people." "Sounds like fun," Eli said, Jake dragging his feet about it. "Jake drags his feet about everything social," Danny said, grinning at me. "That's fair," Eli said, and shot me a look over Danny's shoulder that was somewhere between amused and fond. I went back to the board, drove the nail harder than strictly necessary. Danny stayed another 20 minutes. When he finally climbed back in his truck, he leaned out the window and said to Eli, specifically to Eli, "If you're in town any time this week, come by the Saddleback for a drink. Always good to know the neighbors." He drove off with a wave. Eli watched the truck go. Then he turned back to the barn wall and picked up his hammer. "He seems nice," Eli said. "He's fine," I said. "You sound thrilled." I said he's fine, Eli. There was a pause. I could feel Eli looking at the side of my face. "He was just being neighborly," Eli said. "I know that." "Okay. Can we get back to the boards?" "Sure," Eli said, and there was a note in his voice, something almost like he was trying not to smile, that made me feel simultaneously called out and transparent in a way I deeply did not appreciate. We worked in silence for a while. The hammering was therapeutic. "For what it's worth," Eli said eventually, casual as anything, "I wasn't going to go for drinks with him." I missed the nail and hit my thumb. It was a minor injury. It was also very, very deserved. The summer festival was 2 weeks away, and somehow, through a series of small concessions that I did not fully track as they happened, Eli and I were both going. It started with Mrs. Whitfield calling to see if I'd be volunteering at the livestock tent, the way my father always used to. I said yes, because I could not think of a good reason to say no that wasn't just, "I don't like people looking at me." Then Eli overheard and said he hadn't been to the summer festival since high school and it might be nice. Then my mother called to say she'd be coming down from San Antonio for the weekend and hoped to see me at the festival. And then somehow there was no reasonable way out, and I was standing in my bedroom at 8 in the evening, trying to figure out if my good boots needed polishing. They did. I was on the porch doing it when Eli came and sat on the step beside me. He'd showered and was wearing a dark green Henley with the sleeves pushed up, hair still slightly damp. He smelled like soap and something faintly woodsy that I recognized as the cedar bar soap from the bathroom, which meant he'd used my soap. I noticed this the way you notice a splinter, small, specific, impossible to ignore. He stretched his legs out and tilted his face up toward the evening sky. There were stars starting to show at the edges. "You nervous?" he said. "About what?" I said, polishing the boot, focusing on the boot. "Being around people. I'm around people in town every week. You're around Mr. Harlow at the feed store and Mrs. Whitfield's wave from her driveway. That's not what I mean, and you know it. I'm not nervous. You're polishing your boots at 8 on a Tuesday. They needed polishing. Jake," he said my name the way he sometimes did, level, quiet, almost soft, and it had the same effect it always did, which was to make me feel like I'd been caught at something. I looked up. He was watching me with that warm, careful look. "I'm a little nervous," I admitted. "People are going to ask about the ranch, about whether I'm selling the east pasture, about my plans, like the land is a problem to be solved." "You don't have to answer any of it. You know how people are." "Then stay close to me," he said simply. "I'll do the talking." I looked at him for a moment too long. The evening light was doing that thing again, that amber warm thing that made everything feel close and real. He held my gaze, steady, a small smile at the corner of his mouth like he was both offering something and waiting to see if I'd take it. "You talk enough for both of us already," I said. "Exactly," he said. "I'm well practiced, you're in good hands." He turned his face back to the stars. I turned back to the boot, but the polishing was automatic after that, just movement to give my hands something to do because my mind was busy with 4 words. "You're in good hands." And the particular way he'd said them, easy and warm and like it was a promise he'd been keeping for years. Part 5: The Festival. The morning of the festival was clear and hot, the way Texas mornings in June decide to be without apology. We drove in together in my truck, the windows down, country radio low, Scout in the back refusing to understand why he couldn't come to the fairgrounds. My mother was meeting us there. Eli had his sketchbook in his lap, not open, just resting there the way it always did when he had his hands and didn't know what else to do with them. 20 minutes of road. The sun was still climbing. I was aware, in a way that was new and inconvenient, of the 8 inches of truck bench between us, the exact distance I'd measured without meaning to somewhere around the 3rd week. Close enough to feel the warmth of another person. Not close enough for anything to be complicated, most of the time. "My mom's going to ask about you," I said. "Your mom loves me." "That's the problem. She's going to ask all kinds of questions." Eli grinned. About why you're back, about how long you're staying, about," I stopped. "About what?" I kept my eyes on the road. She has a way of making things into more than they are. Eli was quiet for a beat. "What if they are more?" he said. The truck cab felt suddenly smaller than it was. "What does that mean?" "Just," he turned the sketchbook over in his hands. "Nothing, never mind." He looked out the window. "I'm glad to be back is all I meant." I nodded, kept driving. The silence for the rest of the drive had a texture to it. Not bad, not comfortable either, more like something that was being carefully held. The Millard Creek Summer Festival occupied the town square and the fairgrounds behind the community center, and it was exactly what it had always been, a collection of tents and smells and people who knew each other's grandparents' names. Hay bales and live music, and the particular atmosphere of a small Texas town deciding to be happy for a day regardless of what else was going on. I had mixed feelings about it every year and came every year anyway, because that was what you did. My mother found us within 5 minutes. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman with the same dark hair I had before it started getting sun-bleached, and she hugged me the way she always did, fierce, brief, like she was checking to make sure I was still solid, and then turned to Eli with an expression that was absolutely nothing but delighted. "Eli Carter," she said. "Mrs. Mercer." He hugged her, and she hugged him back, and I watched my mother pat his shoulder and look at him like she was checking him over for damage the same way she'd just done with me. "Too thin," she told him. "Jake's been feeding me." She looked at me. Good. Like this was something she'd been waiting to say. Like his being fed was a personal project of hers that I'd finally gotten around to completing. I had an uncomfortable feeling that my mother knew things I hadn't told her, which was not unusual for my mother, and also not something I was going to examine in the middle of a festival. She walked with us through the tents for a while, catching me up on family news and exclaiming over Eli's sketch of the livestock tent that he did on the back of a paper napkin in about 4 minutes. Then she saw someone she knew across the fairground, Mrs. Harlow, who had apparently just become a grandmother, and peeled off with a quick squeeze of my arm, murmuring something in my ear as she went that sounded a lot like, "Don't waste it." "What did she say?" Eli asked. "Family stuff," I said. The livestock tent went fine. I answered questions about the ranch and fielded the offer on the east pasture from old Bill Hennessy with the same polite, unbudging, not interested, I always used, and Eli stood next to me through most of it and periodically said things that made people laugh and redirected conversations that were getting pointed. He was exactly as useful as he'd promised to be. Better, maybe. The trouble started around 2 in the afternoon. Danny Calloway found us near the food vendors. He was with a group of his friends, and he had that particular energy men get when they're in a social situation that's going well. He clapped me on the shoulder, which I tolerated, and then turned to Eli with a wide grin. "You came," he said, like this was a personal victory. "Couldn't miss it," Eli said. Danny's group absorbed us slightly, the way groups do in social situations, and I found myself at the edge of it, eating a brisket sandwich and watching Danny talk to Eli. They were laughing about something. Danny had a hand briefly on Eli's shoulder, pointing toward the stage where a band was setting up, apparently describing something. Eli was leaning in slightly to hear over the crowd noise. Their heads were close together. I looked at my brisket sandwich. It was a good sandwich. I focused on it. One of Danny's friends, a woman named Rosa who worked at the hardware store, appeared next to me. "You okay?" she said. "You look like someone told you a fence post is rotten." "I'm fine," I said, "just full." She followed my eyeline toward Danny and Eli, said nothing for a moment. Then, "He's a good-looking guy, your friend." "He's fine," I said, which was apparently my default response to anything about Eli today, and had absolutely no weight to it whatsoever. Rosa glanced at me sideways with an expression that suggested she was considerably more perceptive than I wanted her to be. "Right," she said, and went to get a drink, which was the kindest thing she could have done. Eli broke away from Danny's group a few minutes later, appearing at my elbow with a cup of sweet tea and a look that suggested he'd noticed my absence. "You disappeared," he said. "I was right here." "You went very far away while standing in one place. It's a skill." He handed me the tea. Our fingers brushed in the exchange. He didn't look away from my face. "You doing okay?" "I'm doing fine, Eli." "You keep saying that word fine." "Because things are fine." He studied me for a moment. "Jake, you know Danny's just." "Eli," I kept my voice even. "I said I'm fine, can we leave it there?" Something closed up slightly in his expression. Not hurt exactly, more like he'd reached for something and it wasn't there. He nodded once. "Sure," he said. "Want to watch the band?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's watch the band." We stood side by side for the next hour listening to a couple of local musicians do their best with a collection of country standards, and neither of us said much. The festival moved around us. My mother found us again and stood on my other side, and occasionally said something to make Eli smile, and I stood in the middle of it, watching the stage and feeling like I was carrying something very large in a very small space inside my chest with no good place to set it down. Part 6, The Almost. It was the Friday after the festival that it almost happened for the first time. We'd had a long day. A section of the water line in the south pasture had broken slow underground leak that had been turning a section of the field soft and waterlogged without us knowing it, and tracking it down and fixing it had taken most of the day. By 7 in the evening we were back at the house, exhausted and muddy, and neither of us had the energy to cook. I found a frozen lasagna in the back of the freezer that I didn't remember buying. Eli found 2 cold beers in the back of the fridge. We split the lasagna and the beers at the kitchen table and didn't talk much, just ate, and the tiredness made everything feel simple and unguarded in a way that felt almost dangerous. After he went to shower, I washed the dishes. Then I went to clean up too, and when I came back out he was in the living room, lying on his back on the couch with his arm over his face, sketchbook on his chest. He looked like he'd sat down meaning to draw and hadn't made it. That lasagna had no business being that good, he said without moving his arm. It's been in there since February. Preservatives, he said, the great equalizer. I sat in the armchair across from him, the old one with the cracked leather arm. Scout came in and settled on the rug between us. The room was quiet and warm, just the one lamp on, and I had the familiar evening feeling of time slowing down. I was thinking, Eli said, arm still over his face, about what you said at the festival, about people making things into more than they are. I went still. I wasn't talking about anything specific. He moved his arm, looked at the ceiling. I know, but I've been thinking about it. I waited. I'm good at running, he said. You know that, I've gotten really good at it. And part of what I was running from, he stopped, exhaled slowly. Part of it was this, being here, being near, he stopped again. Eli, give me a second. He sat up slowly, moved his sketchbook to the coffee table, ran a hand through his still damp hair. Then he looked at me directly, steadily, the way he did when he'd made a decision and said, I've been trying to figure out how to say this without making everything weird. My heart was beating very hard. I kept my face neutral with considerable effort. Say whatever you need to say, I said. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. The lamp was between us and slightly behind him, and it lit the edge of his shoulder and the side of his face, and left his eyes in that warm, dark amber. Jake, he said, I think. My phone rang. It was the loudest sound I'd heard in months, or at least that's how it felt. We both startled. Scout lifted his head. I grabbed the phone from the side table reflex, and it was Mr. Harlow at the feed store calling about a wrong order. I looked at the phone. I looked at Eli. He sat back. Whatever had been building in his face settled into something quieter. Take it, he said. I took it. The call lasted 10 minutes. When I hung up, Eli was standing in the kitchen doorway, rinsing his beer bottle. I'm going to turn in, he said. His voice was easy, normal, like nothing had happened. Eli. Long day, he said. Sleep well, Jake. And he went down the hall and closed his bedroom door, and I sat in the armchair with Scout at my feet and my phone in my hand, and I thought, I am the worst person I have ever met. I didn't sleep for a long time. Part 7, The Distance. After that, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone outside the two of us would have noticed. The morning routine continued: coffee, cattle, work, meals together, evening on the porch. All of it the same on the surface. But underneath it there was a new current, something that hadn't been there before, and it was made of unfinished sentences and unmade choices. Eli was still warm, still funny, still easy to be around in all the ways that made him impossible to stop watching. But he'd pulled back something, some part of himself that he'd been offering that night in the living room, and whatever it was he'd almost said was still sitting unsaid between us like an object neither of us knew how to move. I didn't press him, partly because I didn't know how, partly because I wasn't sure I was ready for what pressing might uncover, not about him, but about myself, about the things I'd been very carefully not looking at for years. The truth, if I was being honest with the quiet, dark hours of 3 in the morning when honesty becomes unavoidable, was this. I had never looked at a woman the way I looked at Eli Carter. Not once. There had been dates, over the years, girls in high school, a woman in town who'd caught my eye for a while, and they had all been fine in the way most things were fine, and they had all drifted, and I had never chased any of them, and I had never really understood why until recently. Until this specific man had come back into my life and made me realize that what I'd been mistaking for disinterest in people in general was actually something much more specific and much more inconvenient. I had feelings for my best friend. I had probably had them for years, and I had no idea whatsoever what to do about that, or whether doing anything was even the right choice, or whether the thing he'd almost said in the living room meant anything like what I thought it might mean, or whether I had made everything strange by leaving it incomplete, and now it was too late. These were the kinds of thoughts that made 3 in the morning feel very long. 2 weeks after the living room almost moment, Danny Calloway showed up again. This time officially with an invitation. He was having a small gathering at his place, a few neighbors, a cookout, nothing formal. He specifically asked Eli, looking him in the eye when he said it, and I watched Eli hesitate for exactly 1 second before saying, "Sure, that sounded nice." My jaw did something complicated that I hoped wasn't visible. The cookout was on Saturday. I said I had work to do on the barn roof, which was true and also served as a reason to stay home, and Eli looked at me with a level expression and said, "You're not coming." "Barn roof," I said. "It can wait one afternoon." "It's been waiting since March. It's waited long enough." He studied me for a moment. "Jake." "Have a good time, Eli." A careful pause. "Okay," he said. He went in to get ready. I got up on the barn roof. It was hot and the work was tedious, and I had an excellent view of the driveway, which was not at all why I'd chosen this particular job on this particular afternoon. I spent 3 hours replacing damaged shingles and not looking at the driveway, and when Eli's footsteps crunched on the gravel below and he called up, "Be back by 7," and I said, "Fine," without looking down, I told myself that was a completely normal interaction between two adults with their own lives. I was on the barn roof for 4 hours. The job took 2. He was back by 6:30. I heard his boots on the porch steps and heard the front door and did not come down from the barn roof for another 20 minutes because I needed to finish the row I was working on and not for any other reason. When I finally came in, he was in the kitchen, making something on the stove that smelled like garlic and olive oil. He glanced at me when I came in. "Good time," I said, neutral even. "It was nice," he said. "Danny's a good host. His cousin was there, real funny. Rosa from the hardware store came too. He stirred something in the pan. You should have come." "Barn's done," I said. "Is it?" "Most of the east side." "Great." The word was even, completely impossible to read. I washed up at the sink. He plated the food, pasta with something. I wasn't really tracking it, and set both plates at the table and we sat down to eat. It was good. Everything he made was good. I told him so because it was true and because I was a grown man who could function normally. "Danny asked about you," he said. "What about me?" "Whether you were always this solitary or if something happened." "What'd you tell him?" "The truth, that you're the most self-contained person I've ever met and also one of the best." He was looking at his plate when he said it. I just didn't add the part where it drives me completely insane sometimes. I set my fork down. "What does that mean?" He looked up. His expression was complicated, not angry, not sad, just layered in a way that suggested a lot of things running at once. "It means," he said carefully, "that you're very hard to reach, Jake. You always have been. And usually I accept that because it's you and you're worth the effort. But lately," he stopped, pressed his lips together briefly. "Lately I feel like I keep trying to hand you something and you keep just setting it on a shelf." The kitchen was very quiet. I could hear the stove ticking as it cooled. "Eli," I said. My voice was low. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "I'm not trying to make this a thing, he exhaled. "I needed you to know that." He picked up his fork and went back to his food. I sat there for a long moment, looking at my plate, feeling that heavy, wide, impossible thing moving around in my chest like something that needed room I wasn't giving it. "I don't know how to do this," I said finally. He looked up. "I'm not good at," I pressed the heel of my hand to the table, steadying myself. "I don't say things, I know that, it's not," I started again. "I'm not putting things on a shelf, I'm just scared," he said, very quiet, not challenging, just asking. It landed somewhere precise and accurate, and I had absolutely no follow-up for it. "Yeah," I said, "the word cost me something, maybe." He nodded, didn't push, didn't say scared of what or you don't have to be or any of the things that could have made it smaller than it was. He just nodded and went back to his food, and we finished the meal in a silence that was different from all the previous silences, more honest maybe, more full of things acknowledged even if they hadn't been named. Part 8: The Storm. The second storm came on a Thursday night in early July, bigger than the first and meaner about it. I'd been tracking it on the radar since afternoon. By evening the sky had that particular yellow-green cast that means business, and I got the horses in early, checked the latches on the barn, pulled the chairs off the porch. Eli helped without being asked, moving with that easy competence he'd always had in practical situations. We were back inside by the time the first real roll of thunder hit. The power went out around 9. I had candles, rancher's habit, and we lit them, half a dozen around the kitchen and living room. Rain was hammering the windows. Occasional lightning made the curtains white. Scout had wedged himself under the coffee table with the fatalistic expression of a dog who's decided the apocalypse is someone else's problem. We sat in the living room, candles between us, the storm making the night feel smaller and closer than it usually was. Eli had his sketchbook, though the light wasn't great. I had my coffee, gone lukewarm. Neither of us was pretending to do much. "Do you remember the storm when we were 16? Eli said. I did. His family's power had been out for 2 days. He'd stayed at the ranch, slept in the spare room. We'd spent 2 days playing cards by lantern light while his parents waited for the electric company to get things sorted. "Yeah," I said. I was terrified that whole time. He was looking at his sketchbook, not sketching, just running his thumb along the edge of the pages. "Thunderstorms got to me when I was a kid, still kind of do, but I didn't want to tell you. Because you were so," he smiled slightly, "so completely unbothered, like the storm was just an inconvenience." "I was bothered," I said. "I didn't show it." "That's what I mean. You've always done that, made everything look easy, made the world look manageable." He looked at me. "It made me want to be near you when things felt too big. You were like a," he laughed softly, "like a fixed point. Does that make sense?" "Not sure that's a compliment." "It's the highest compliment I know how to give." He said it simply, like a fact. "You make things feel possible just by being steady. I've counted on that more than I ever told you." I watched the candle flame between us. It was doing that thing flame does in a drafty room, leaning and recovering. "Why'd you stop calling?" I said. It came out before I'd decided to say it. He was quiet for a moment. "I told you I was running." "From what specifically?" Another silence. Longer. Outside the storm surged, rain against the window like white noise. "From this," he said. "From being near you and knowing how I felt about it and not being able to." He stopped, set the sketchbook down on the cushion next to him, looked at me directly. "From the fact that I have been in love with you since we were 19 years old and I didn't know what to do with that then, and I wasn't sure I knew what to do with it now, and I thought maybe distance would fix it, and it did not fix it even slightly." The candle between us was the only thing moving. And then it wasn't, because I wasn't moving either, and neither was he, and the room was full of the sound of rain, and the creak of the house settling in the wind, and I don't know how long I sat there with those words, rearranging everything inside me like furniture moved in a room I'd been navigating in the dark. "Eli," I said. "You don't have to say anything," he said, and there was something careful and protected in his voice. "I know it's a lot. I know you probably." "Eli." He stopped. I leaned forward, put my forearms on my knees, made myself keep his gaze, even though something in me wanted to look away from the realness of it, from the fact that he was sitting there with 3 years of honesty on his face and a storm outside, and the specific amber light of candles making everything feel like something you couldn't take back. "I have been scared," I said, "of exactly this, since before you came back, since I stopped, tried again. I didn't know what to call it, I'm not," I exhaled. Let go of the careful structure I was trying to build. "I don't know how to explain how I feel, but I know that when you're not in the room I notice it, and when you are I can't stop." I pressed my fist against the side of my knee. "I can't stop paying attention to you, every single thing. And I don't know what that makes me, or what it means about who I am, but I know that I don't want you to go. And I know that when Calloway put his hand on your shoulder at the festival, I wanted to." I stopped. Eli's face had gone completely still. His eyes were very dark in the candle light. "You wanted to what?" he said, barely above a whisper. "I wanted him to take his hand off you," I said, "and that wasn't a friend thing." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Have you ever," he paused, "is this new, what you're feeling, or do you think it's been?" "Long time," I said. "I just didn't have words for it." Something changed in his face, softened completely, in a way that made my chest ache with the size of it. "Jake," he said. My name in his voice like that was its own language. "I know," I said. "I know I'm slow, I know it took me." "No," he said. "Don't apologize for that, please." He moved forward on the cushion, closer. "I'm not looking for a timeline, I'm just—" He reached out, put his hand over mine where it was resting on my knee. His hand was warm. I could feel the slight roughness of his palm, the work we'd done together in it. I looked down at our hands, then up at his face. The storm was still going. Scout had come out from under the coffee table and was lying on the rug, watching us with the mildly confused expression of a dog witnessing something he fundamentally doesn't understand. "I don't really know what I'm doing," I said. "Neither do I," he said, "mostly." "That's not reassuring." "No," he agreed, the corner of his mouth curved. "But it's true, and I thought we were trying honesty." I looked at him, at the candlelight on his face, at the steady way he was watching me, not demanding anything, not pushing, just there, just present, the way he'd been present since the 3rd grade when he sat down next to me under the oak tree and offered me a chip like we'd been doing this our whole lives. "Maybe we had been." "Eli," I said. "Yeah. I'm glad you came back." He turned his hand over under mine, wove his fingers through mine, very slowly, giving me every chance to stop him if I wanted to. I didn't stop him. I held on. "I'm not leaving again," he said quietly. "Not like that." We stayed like that while the storm went through, hands together, the candles burning down, Scout eventually snoring on the rug, and neither of us said anything more for a long time because we didn't need to. Some things are understood in the quiet. The most important things, maybe. The ones you've both been carrying for so long that saying them out loud is less an announcement than a permission. Permission to finally set the weight down and breathe. Part 9, the morning after. I woke up before 5. The storm had cleared. Through the window I could see the sky was doing that particular thing it does after a hard rain, still dark at the edges but already going soft gray at the horizon. The air washed clean, the world smelling like wet earth and new starts. I lay there for a few minutes, longer than I usually would, thinking. Eli had stayed in the living room until after midnight, the two of us eventually pulling out an old card game and playing in the candle light with our usual easy quiet, occasionally saying something, occasionally not. At some point he put his head back on the couch cushion and closed his eyes, still holding the hand of cards he'd been dealt, and I'd watched him for a minute in the dimming candlelight. The long line of him relaxed and still, the way his lashes curved, the rise and fall of his breathing. And then I'd gotten up carefully and put a throw blanket over him and gone to bed. I was 24 years old. I had known this man since we were 8. I had just figured out in a summer storm that I was in love with him, and the only thing more terrifying than that was the fact that it felt, underneath the fear, like something I'd always known and simply hadn't had the right word for. I got up, made coffee, went out to the porch. He appeared at the door about 15 minutes later, throw blanket around his shoulders, hair impressively chaotic, holding out his hand with the universal expression of a man who needs coffee before language is possible. I passed him my mug. He sat down next to me on the steps. We watched the sun come up. Dusk and Pepper were moving in the wet pasture. The cattle were visible as slow shapes in the gray morning, and Scout was doing his rounds, nose down, full of professional purpose. After a while, Eli said, "How are you doing?" "Fine," I said. He looked at me. "Good," I said. "I think still processing." He nodded, drank my coffee. "Me too," he said. "For the record, I'm not," he exhaled. "I've been holding that for a long time, saying it out loud is," he shook his head slightly. "Strange, good strange, but strange." "Yeah. We don't have to," he started. "I know," I said. "I'm not trying to rush." "Eli," I looked at him. "I know I'm not going anywhere either." I paused. "As established, I don't go anywhere." The corner of his mouth twitched. "That is both a comfort and a mild personality concern." "Thank you." He laughed. The real one, the sudden one, the one that went through my chest like a hand pressed flat against it. He leaned his shoulder against mine, casual, warm, the way you do with someone when the distance between you has finally closed. And we sat like that with the morning coming in, and the coffee between us, and 340 acres of land waking up in the new light. I thought about what my mother had said at the festival, "Don't waste it." I thought she'd meant the ranch. Maybe the ranch wasn't what she meant. "I want to take it slow," I said. "I don't." I turned it over, trying to find the right words. "I don't want to rush something and then not know what to do with it. I need to actually figure out who you are in this," he said quietly. "Yeah. I've had 3 years to get there," he said. "You've had about one night. We can go at your speed, Jake." He looked at me sideways. "But I'm not going to pretend the last year of pushing my feelings down is just going to go back in the box. I'm saying that honestly, not as pressure, just so you know where I am." "I know where you are," I said. "I heard you last night." "Okay," he nodded. "Okay, good. I'm hearing you now." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Is this weird, us, after last night?" I considered it. The morning light was all the way up now, full and gold, turning the wet grass brilliant. Dusk was watching us from the fence line with the serene lack of judgment that is the best quality of horses. "Honestly," I said, "that's kind of our thing now. It feels like," I tried to find it, "it feels like something I've been carrying all this time just got lighter, not easy, but lighter." He was quiet for another beat. Then he looked at me, and there was something in his face, relief, maybe, and something else, something that looked a lot like hope, and he nodded once slowly like something had been decided. "Good," he said. "That's good, Jake." The morning kept going. We had cattle to feed and horses to check, and 340 acres that needed tending. But we sat there a few minutes longer than we needed to shoulder on the porch steps, and neither of us was in a particular hurry to move. Part 10, The Long Days. July moved through the ranch the way summer always does out here, enormous and bright and relentless about it, the heat building by 10 in the morning and staying until after the sun went down. We worked in the early mornings before it got bad and again in the evenings when things cooled. And in between, we found shade and water and the rhythm of two people who had figured something out about themselves and were now, quietly, cautiously, learning what came next. What came next, it turned out, looked a lot like what had already been, except that something had been unclenched. The careful distance I'd been keeping with myself, the habit of looking away, the deliberate not noticing. I let that go slowly in pieces, the way you let out a rope a few feet at a time. It was new and not entirely comfortable, and also the best I'd felt in as long as I could remember. Little things changed, not big, dramatic things. There was no announcement, no moment that declared itself. It was more like a gradual permission. I let myself look at him when he wasn't watching. I let myself notice things without immediately directing my attention somewhere else. The way he hummed while he worked. The way his hands moved when he was sketching, certain and quick, like he knew exactly where every line was going before he made it. The way he looked when he laughed at something the cattle did, head back, eyes bright, completely unself-conscious. And he didn't push. He did what he'd always done, which was to take his cue from me, to give me space while staying present in it. But things were different. He would find small reasons to be close. Not obvious, not staged, just close. Reaching past me for something. Sitting on the step below me when I was up on the porch railing, fixing a loose post so that he was nearly at eye level, leaning against my knee without seeming to notice he was doing it. Finding my shoulder with his in the evenings, the way he'd done that morning after the storm. I started finding reasons to be close too, handing him things, stopping next to him at the fence line when a quick look would have done it, sitting closer on the porch than I needed to. We didn't talk about it explicitly, not right away. We just let it accumulate, the way trust accumulates slowly, in good faith, one thing at a time. There was an afternoon in the third week of July that I won't forget. We'd been repairing the old chicken coop. My mother had mentioned wanting to add hens again, and the coop hadn't been used in years, and it was a fiddly job, worse in the heat. By mid-afternoon, we were sitting in the shade on the far side of the coop, backs against the sun-warmed wood, both of us tired and sweaty, and eating the sandwiches we'd brought out in the morning before they got any worse. Eli had his eyes closed, face tipped back, just resting. I was eating and watching the field and being aware of him the way I was always aware of him now, like a frequency I'd stopped trying not to receive. He said, without opening his eyes, "Tell me something you've never told anyone." I thought about it. "I almost sold the ranch," I said. 6 months after my dad died, had the papers, had the buyer, sat at the kitchen table with a pen for 40 minutes and then put it away. Eli opened his eyes, looked at me sideways. "Why didn't you?" he said. I kept thinking about my dad walking the south pasture in the mornings. Same route every day, same order. Creek bend to the old oak, down along the fence, back up through the center field. I looked at the field in front of us. I thought if I sell, that route just stops. Nobody walks it. It just becomes somebody else's land, and all those mornings become nothing. I paused. Probably sounds foolish. "It doesn't," he said, simply, "no more than that." "Your turn," I said. He was quiet for a moment, pulled a piece of crust off his sandwich, the way he always did, never explaining why. "I was in a relationship in the city," he said, "for about a year, a man named Marcus. He was good, genuinely good, and he cared about me and I cared about him, and it still didn't work because the whole time there was this." He stopped. "This comparison happening, this awareness of something that felt more true, and I couldn't be fair to him with that happening, so I ended it. He deserved better." He looked at his sandwich. "That's the thing I feel worst about. Not any of it, really, except Marcus. He didn't do anything wrong." "I'm sorry," I said. "It was the right call." He glanced at me. "Do you feel better knowing you weren't the only one who spent a long time not knowing what to do with himself?" "I don't feel better," I said. "I feel bad that it cost you something." He looked at me steadily for a moment. "You're a good person, Jake Mercer." "You're too generous." "I'm accurate." He went back to his sandwich. "And for the record, it's not the same cost from my end. I know what I want. You're still figuring it out. I'm not asking for any promises you don't have yet." "What if I told you," I said carefully, "that I think I'm closer to knowing than I was a month ago?" He went still. Not in a startled way, more in the way a flame goes still when the air around it stops moving. "I'd say," he said just as carefully, "that sounds like progress." "Yeah," I said, "I think it is." He nodded, A small, contained nod like something had been carefully filed away in a good place. He finished his sandwich. I finished mine. We went back to the chicken coop. But for the rest of that afternoon, I caught him smiling at nothing in particular. And I didn't ask him why, because I was probably doing the same thing. Part 11, the question. August came and the heat got worse before it got better, the way it always does. My mother visited for a long weekend at the beginning of the month. She helped me go through some of my father's things that I'd been putting off for 2 years, which was hard in a quiet way, and Eli gave us space for it, mostly disappearing into the barn or the fields during those hours and leaving dinner on the stove when we came in. My mother noticed this. She noticed everything. On her last morning, while Eli was outside, she sat across from me at the kitchen table with her coffee and said, "You're different." "I'm tired," I said. "We went through a lot of boxes." "That's not what I mean." I looked at her. She had her patient expression, the one that meant she'd already decided how the conversation was going to go and was just waiting for me to catch up. "He's good for this place," she said, "for you. He's always been a good person." "Jake," she set her mug down, "I'm your mother. I've known you your whole life. I've also known for longer than you probably think that there are things you hadn't figured out yet." She paused. "I'm not going to make a speech. I'm just going to say whatever is happening between the two of you, don't let fear make the decision for you. You let it make too many decisions already." She picked her mug back up, returned to her coffee, and moved the conversation smoothly to whether I was going to get the roof fixed before winter. But the words landed where she meant them to land, and I sat with them all day, turning them over. Don't let fear make the decision for you. My father used to say something similar in fewer words about the land. Don't let what you're afraid of losing decide what you do with it. Act from what you love, not from what you're scared of. Maybe that applied to more than land. The night my mother left, Eli and I sat on the porch as usual, and the conversation found its own level. As it usually did, and at some point the talk ran out and we were just sitting in the dark with the fireflies and the crickets and the particular piece of a summer night that has finally given up some of its heat. "Can I show you something?" Eli said. "Yeah." He went inside and came back with his sketchbook. He sat down beside me closer than usual, our knees almost touching, and opened it to a page near the middle. He held it out. It was a sketch of me. I was sitting in the armchair in the living room, leaned forward with my forearms on my knees, looking down at something I couldn't see in the sketch. The candle light from the night of the storm, I realized he'd been drawing from memory. The sketch was detailed in a quiet way, not dramatic, not idealized, just honest, just me. He'd written something small along the bottom margin, in his narrow handwriting. I tilted the book to read it in the dim light. The way he looks when he doesn't know I'm watching. I held the book for a moment, then I handed it back. "How long have you been drawing me like this?" I said. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "Long time," he said. "Years." He closed the book, set it on the step between us. "I didn't know if I was ever going to show you." "What changed?" I said. He looked at me. The light was low, just the lamp through the window and the fireflies in the grass, but I could see his face clearly enough. Clear enough to see that he wasn't hiding anything. "You," he said, "you changed, or you started letting me see you changing, and I thought," he exhaled, "I thought if I was going to be brave about one thing this summer, it might as well be everything." I was quiet. Somewhere in the pasture, dusk made a soft sound. Scout shifted at my feet. "Eli," I said. "Yeah. I want to ask you something." "Okay." I looked at my hands for a moment, made myself look up. "If I asked you not today, but sometime if you'd want to," I stopped. Started over because the careful structure wasn't working, and I'd learned this summer that the honest version, even when it was rougher, was usually better. "I think I'm in love with you," I said. "I think I've been in love with you for a long time, and the word just finally found the right place in me to land. And I don't know if I have everything figured out, I probably don't, but I know that every good thing about this summer has been because you're here and I don't want that to stop." I paused. So I'm asking, not for a specific thing, just asking if you'd be willing to figure it out with me, the way we figure out everything else on this ranch, as we go. The fireflies were doing what they do, making small lights in the dark. Eli looked at me for a long moment, long enough that I had time to feel the full weight of having said it, the exposure of it, the terrifying openness of letting someone all the way in. Then he reached over and put his hand over mine, the way he had during the storm, fingers weaving through fingers. "Jake Mercer," he said, and his voice was very low and very warm. "I have been waiting for you to ask me something like that for a very long time." "I'm slow," I said. "You're thorough," he said. "There's a difference." I looked at our hands, then at him. "So that's a yes," I said. "That," he said, "is the loudest yes I have ever said in my life." Part 12, what comes after? The word for what happened after that is slowly. Not in a bad way, not in the way of something stalled or uncertain, in the way of something built well, thing by thing, the way a good fence is built, one post at a time, solid, each piece checked before the next goes in. We had conversations, real ones, the kind that start at 8 in the evening and find themselves still going at midnight, about who we were and who we wanted to be and what it meant and what we were afraid of and what we hoped for. Some of those conversations were easy. Some of them were hard. Some of them were both at once, the way the hardest true things usually are. I called my mother. She cried a little, the happy kind, and then very quickly recovered and asked if I'd gotten the roof fixed yet. I told her I had. She said good, and she was glad, and that my father would have liked Eli, which I already knew, which still meant something to hear. I was not a person who had the language for all of this figured out. I was not, and I probably still am not, the kind of person who finds it easy to say things out loud before he's turned them over 16 times in his own head. But I was learning. That's what I can say with honesty. I was learning. And Eli was patient in the way that actual patience is, which is not passive but active, a choice made every day to give someone the time they need. And he was teaching me, without meaning to or trying to, that being known by someone doesn't have to feel like exposure. It can feel like relief, like the feeling after a long, hard day of work when you finally get to sit down, not the end of something, but the right kind of rest in the middle of it. There was an evening near the end of August that I want to tell you about. The light in late August is different here. Lower, more golden, with a softness to it that July doesn't have, like the land is letting down its guard a little after the worst of the heat. We'd had a good day. Nothing dramatic. Just the ranch and the work, and the particular satisfaction of a day that went the way it was supposed to. I'd finished the south fence line. Eli had repaired the old well cover and started painting the coop. And by evening we were both worn out in the good way, and the light was doing its late August thing across the pasture. He came to find me at the fence line just before 6, carrying 2 cold waters and walking through the grass with Scout ranging ahead of him, and I watched him come and let myself just watch, the way I can now. The way I'm learning to. He handed me a water bottle and stood beside me at the fence, both of us looking out at the land. "Good day," he said. "Good day," I agreed. After a moment he leaned his head against my shoulder, briefly, the way someone does when they're at ease, not romantic exactly, just close, just comfortable, just the natural weight of someone who has decided you're a place they belong. I stood there and felt the weight of it and didn't move away from it. "I've been thinking," he said, still looking out at the field. "Dangerous." "Very," he paused. "I want to paint something, the ranch. Not a sketch, a real painting, big. I want to try to get what this place looks like in this light." "You could do that." "I'd need space. A corner of the barn, maybe." "You can have the whole barn." He lifted his head, looked at me. There was something in his face, surprise, and then something warmer. "I was going to negotiate from the corner," he said. "You negotiated before you walked out here," I said. "You just didn't know it." He laughed. And then we were both laughing, out there at the fence line with the late August light on the field and Scout coming back from wherever he'd been to see what the noise was about, and it was not a dramatic moment, not cinematic in the way of storms and revelations. It was just two people, together on a piece of land, laughing at nothing particular, which is maybe the best kind of moment there is. Epilogue: The ranch in October. The fall came the way it always does, gradually, and then all at once. The mornings got cool again. The grass went gold at the edges. The sky, that Texas October blue that seems bigger and higher than any other month's sky, and the light moved across the land differently, lower and more sideways, throwing long shadows from the fence posts and the oak trees in the south pasture. The ranch is the same 340 acres it's always been. The cattle are doing well this year. The south fence line is solid. The roof on the house got done in September. We did it together. A long weekend of work that left both of us sore in places we didn't know could be sore. The chicken coop is finished, and my mother has 9 hens in it that she named after various country music singers, which is her choice to make. Eli's painting is on the east wall of the barn. He finished it last week. It's the view from the house at golden hour, the pasture, the creek bend, the tree line, the cattle moving in the middle distance. He got the light right. I don't know how, but he got it exactly right, the way the late sun turns everything amber and warm and possible looking. He stood next to me when I first saw it and didn't say anything, just waited, and I looked at it for a long time, and then I said, "It looks like home." "That's what I was going for," he said. He's still here. That's the thing I keep coming back to. He's still here, and every morning when I come out of my room at 5 there is coffee already going, because he started getting up 5 minutes earlier just to have it ready. Which he claims is for practical reasons, and which I know is because he pays attention to me in ways I spent years not letting anyone do. We have coffee on the porch. We watch the sun come up. Scout sits between us and pretends he has a preference about which one of us he's more devoted to, which he does not. The morning is always the same, and it is never once ordinary. I told him last week, out on the porch in the early morning cold with our hands wrapped around our mugs, that I love him. Plainly, without a storm requiring it, without a revelation, just said it, because it was true, and because my mother was right and I was done letting fear choose. He didn't say anything for a moment. Just looked at me, and then out at the field, and then down at his coffee. And there was a smile on his face that I know is mine to claim, that particular one, the quiet one he gets when something has made him genuinely happy. "I love you too, Jake," he said, in case that was not already extremely clear. "It was clear," I said. "I just wanted to say it first, for once." He laughed, leaned his shoulder against mine. The sun was coming up over the east pasture, doing what it does, making everything in front of us gold and wide and worth waking up early for. The ranch is still the same 340 acres. It is not the same ranch. This land has been in my family for 2 generations. My grandfather broke the first ground. My father poured his life into it, every early morning, every hard season. He left it to me, and I almost let fear make me give it away. And then I didn't, because I thought about a man walking his morning route across the south pasture, and how I couldn't bear to let that disappear. My father used to say the land knows what it needs and it'll tell you, if you pay attention. I've always believed that about the ranch. I'm starting to believe it about other things too. I am 24 years old. I own 340 acres, 2 horses, 43 cattle, a border collie who is faithful to whoever fed him most recently, a farmhouse with a new roof, a barn with a painting on the east wall, a kitchen table that's had more real conversations in the last 4 months than in the previous 2 years combined. And I have Eli Carter, who came back in a rainstorm at 5 in the morning, who works as hard as anyone I've known, who draws the world the way it actually looks, who is patient with me in all the ways that matter, who makes coffee before I wake up and sits on the porch step with his shoulder against mine and laughs at nothing in the middle of a pasture. Some mornings I still sit on the edge of my bed for a moment before I get up, and I think about all the years I spent not knowing what to call the thing that was missing. And then I hear the coffee maker in the kitchen and I know exactly where it is, and I lace up my boots and I go out to meet the day. "Don't waste it," my mother said. I'm not.
The end. If this story hit you somewhere deep, somewhere real, you are not alone. That's the whole point. Jake spent your thinking something was wrong with him for not fitting the shape he thought he was supposed to be. Eli spent 3 years running from the most honest thing he would ever felt. And the moment they both stopped running, the moment they let the truth be bigger than the fear, that's where the story begins. If you made it this far, thank you. Seriously, you just read something that a lot of people are too scared to even search for. That takes something, that means something. Like this story if it moved you, even just a little. Subscribe so you never miss the next LGBTQ and interesting stories. Comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest, the storm, the sketch, or the fence line at the end. And one more thing, Jake still has not told his neighbor Danny Calloway why he turned down every single invitation after the festival. Danny think it's because Jake is just that antisocial. Danny is about to figure out he is very, very wrong. Thanks for watching and keep watching.